We are here on this earth to pray. Now, I'm not talking about the calling of sacredness into our lives kind of praying. I'm talking about the kind of praying in the predator-prey relationship. We are all in that club. We are in the club of the predator-prey cycle. It's beautiful that we evolved to take care of ourselves, to nurture ourselves, but this comes at expense and harm to others. I've always thought that we needed an eighth principle in Unitarian Universalism. We must harm to survive. Albert Schweitzer called this the necessity of life, that none of us can escape that we harm others for our own benefit. And he said it lays a great burden upon us. The good news is that we also evolved to collaborate. Why do we collaborate? Well, we do it because we need each other to survive. We depend on one another, our own species. We also depend on a healthy ecological community and healthy individual species within that community. This is what makes us whole and brings us life. But how do we do that exactly? How do we choose to meet the needs of the many when we're also trying to meet our own needs? How can we have faith in the interdependent web that says we are harmed and we must harm to survive, and there's benefit and harm and beauty and tragedy all wrapped up together? That's our seventh principle. Well, I think we can find a way through with wisdom and reverence. We are growing wiser as a species every day because we're telling a new story that it isn't all about eat or be eaten. It's about that humans do not have to choose themselves over their other species, nor do we need to choose those with power and privilege over those without. We can choose compassion and love, but it's not easy to do. So I would like to tell you a story about a people who found a way to do this. And they show us the way of wisdom and the miracle of commitment. As a wildlife veterinarian, I work in Central America, and I had the honor 2 years ago to start working with the indigenous people in Honduras. It's a group that live on the Mosquito Coast. They're Los Mosquitians. They have their own language and their own culture. And I went there to try to see if we could find out how their scarlet macaws are doing. The scarlet macaws is this parrot right here, the big red rainbow bird with the long tails. There's only about 150 of them left in Honduras now, when there used to be tens of thousands there. And they have all gathered in this area of Mosquitia, where the remaining indigenous people have also gathered. So it isn't only the birds that are under threat. People take their chicks to sell them for the pet trade illegally, but the people themselves are under threat. They don't have clear title to the land. They're indigenous people. They've lived there forever. So people, nefarious elements, the drug trade, money laundering, people want this land, and they are willing to kill for it. Tomas was an elder of one of the villages that we worked with, is still an elder. And he got tired of these people coming in and stealing the macaws, burning down the pine trees, taking their land, threatening his people. So he turned in their names to the government agencies, who wouldn't do anything, but he had to try. Well, what people did were those people he turned in, and they waited for him down at the river one morning when he took his morning bath, and they shot him 4 times. He barely survived. I met him 5 months later when we were scheduled to go down to Honduras and see what was going on with the scarlet macaws, and he went with us, limping and trudging along. We had to hire the military to go in with us to protect us as well as Tomas. His whole village had to flee because they're under constant threats against their life. But he came back, and one day when he was showing me his scars, I said, Tomas, why are you risking so much for these parrots and to help us help you and your people with these parrots? And he said, Doctora, everything is at risk. So I am willing to risk everything. If the birds don't make it, we don't either. He's not alone. The following year, more people came back to this ghost-like village to try to reaffirm that this is their land and they belong there. And they joined us out studying the parrots. And we were there much longer, and we were able to get a better idea of what was going on. And nearly, 90% of the chicks were being poached and taken from the area. And I told them, I said, if this keeps up 1 year more, 2 years more, you're not going to have enough genetic vigor. This population's going to crash and you're going to lose them. So what these people did, they called the leaders, the two villages together. And they decided that they were going to mount parrot patrols to walk underneath the nest trees twice a day after our scientific expedition left, at risk to their own lives. And so we left, and the birds immediately started to get poached because we left with the military. They were able to protect about half the chicks, but the other half got taken from their nest. But they didn't give up then. They went into the homes, again, against risk to their own life, and took those chicks out of those homes. And then they said, now what? We don't have running water, we don't have electricity, we barely have enough resources to feed ourselves, we know nothing about animal husbandry or avian release or conservation. What will we do? So we managed a little bit through people driving 4 hours to the nearest city and emails and phone calls to help guide them through this process. And so they built a chicken wire cage in the middle of their village, and they put all the macaws in there. There were 11 at that time. And they added 4 more the next year. And they waited for the birds to grow up. They fed them fruit and rice and beans. And when the birds had all their feathers long enough to fly, they opened the doors. And out went that flock of birds. They come back every night and eat rice and beans with the villagers. And they perch in the trees above the homes. 10 months ago, an armed group of men came to that village and stole everything that was valuable from these people. Well, not everything. The people are still there, and the birds are still flying free. These people know that as long as the birds stay free, they are free too. That the liberating of the birds is their liberation. That the saving of themselves is tied in with the saving of the birds. Now, they're just like us. There's no reason to romanticize them. They fuss with each other, they make bad decisions based on their desires, and they break up in relationships. But maybe they know something we struggle with. They know that there is no position of power and privilege for anyone in this world. If one of us doesn't make it, none of us make it. They aren't saints. They're just trying to save themselves. All of our daily choices are like that. We're just doing the precious work of saving ourselves and saving the planet while we're at it. Whatever your choices are, it's not a litmus test of whether you belong in this tribe or that tribe, or whether you're pure or impure. We all belong on this planet, and the earth belongs to no one. Our work is to grow in this faith of belonging, to grow in this wisdom, so that we can welcome others to our shared home. In 2011, the General Assembly of Unitarian Universalists passed a statement of conscience on ethical eating. And this is one paragraph out of that. Unitarian Universalists aspire to radical hospitality and developing the beloved community. Therefore, we affirm that the natural world exists not for the sole benefit of one nation, one race, one gender, one religion, or even one species, but for all. Working in the defense of mutual interests, Unitarian Universalists acknowledge and accept the challenge of enlarging our circle of moral concern to include all living creatures. Our passions are consuming the world. We were born to do so. Our compassion can save the world. We were born to do so. But how do we do this tough work? How can we be fed not just by our passions, but a fulfilling sense of gratitude? Well, this same statement of conscience ends with an idea. With gratitude and reverence, we savor food, mindful of all that has contributed to it. We commit ourselves to a more equitable sharing of the earth's bounty. And though this statement is about food, we could say with gratitude and reverence for all life, we savor everything mindful of what has contributed to our lives. With gratitude and reverence, we can grow our sense of belonging, compassion, and collaboration. By feeling blessed, we can return blessings onto the world. We can do this in part through reverence. Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker is the president of Starr King School of Ministry. She has something to say about reverence. Reverence is a form of love. It involves full-fledged devotion enacted in deeds of care and responsibility. Reverence is this kind of form of love that needs to be learned and affirmed. And this is what congregations are for, to teach us to give reverent attention to life. The task given to us here and now is to do what we can do to advance reverence for life and deepen the promise of love. The task of our congregations, of this congregation, is to deepen the promise of love. And we can do this by learning and experiencing reverence together. We can do this by slowing down and listening and paying attention. In my work as a wildlife veterinarian in Honduras, I do a stealth ministry. I put on my minister hat as well, and I invite people to slow down so that we can share reverence, so we can somehow make meaning of the beauty and tragedy in our lives and in the birds' lives. This slowing down was much like the weekend that I spent with you all, with the multi-species awareness encounter yesterday in the workshop and the evening presentations, of slowing down to see beauty and to recommit our lives. So one day, well, actually every day, we take time out to make meaning in our lives and to discuss what's going on and what it means to us. We gathered in the morning, there were about 20 of us in the center of the village. And when it came my turn to share words of reverence, I wanted to share my favorite poem, Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. Except, and please forgive me, Mary Oliver, I inserted words that would have meaning to them and switched out geese for macaws. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the jungle repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world moves on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rains are moving across the jungles and the pine savannas and the deep rivers and the rice and cornfields. Meanwhile, the macaws, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. And right at that moment, when I got to that poem, we heard calling off in the distance scarlet macaws flying towards the village. And we could see off in the distance that there were 5 of them, an unusual and rare sighting, because that probably meant 2 parents and 3 chicks, a family group. And I continued on with the poem. No matter who you are, no matter how lonely you are, the world offers itself to your imagination. It calls to you like the macaws, harsh and exciting, announcing over and over your place in the family of things. And right at that moment, the macaws were directly overhead, squawking and calling out as they went by. We wept. We of many ethnicities and nationalities, seeing those birds, sharing that moment of reverence, allowed us to recommit to life around us and life in us. Reverence for life A commitment to that allows people in extraordinary situations to do extraordinary work. It's the dream of congregational life. Albert Schweitzer said, having reverence for a life allows us to have a spiritual connection with the world. By practicing reverence of life, we become good and deep and alive. So how do you here in your own lives become good and deep and alive? There are many paths to reverence and to compassionate action in the world. Maybe yours is not the jungles of Africa, like it was for Albert Schweitzer, or the jungles of Central America, as it is for me. Maybe your way in is your dog or your cat at home. The armadillos or the macaws flying over the bosque. The Rio Grande, the mountains covered with snow, your loved ones at home and the people sitting next to you. No matter what your path is for reverence, to experiencing awe and wonder, stalk it relentlessly. We are fierce predators, and let us pray for reverence and the flourishing of all creatures of the earth and sky. May it be so. And to celebrate